Any action where the exertion, the intention to do, is not forthcoming and the muscles or the body is organized to do that, cannot participate as a whole, and instead of movement, there is only static effort. For instance, you will find it extremely difficult if you try to move the wall, because all your exertion will not reproduce any movement. That's equivalent of a catatonic action. You can contract your body as much as you want. You can contract your muscles to the maximum. But no matter how much you exert your will to do something, nothing is being done. There's no movement. Now, the best feeling is when the slightest suggestion of doing it is immediately transferred in movement. For instance, if you try to waltz, where the slightest movement of the pelvis immediately moves the whole body. Therefore, a slight movement, a slight exertion is immediately transformed into movement. The whole body moves. And this is the nicest feeling of doing something, when all your effort, all the exertion is transformed into movement, immediately into action. That's the feeling of pleasure, and that never feels like an effort at all. Now, you can go on waltzing like that until you're tired. And then you will find that instead of moving the way you did before, something is changed. And what has changed? Exactly the shape of the movement is the same. But what in your body you find that instead of moving, of distributing the exertion in a way that all the muscles have the same tonus, the same degree of exertion, as soon as that is interrupted, it also feels like terrible work. Now, therefore, if you try to stand on your finger, you feel the effort is enormous, because the arm, the hand will work to the utmost, but the rest of the body can't even cooperate at all. So that's a terrific effort. Awful. In fact, if you try to stand in a barrel where you can't fall, and you put your hand and stand on the finger, you can't fall, but you'll find the effort beyond your power. It will break your finger. But, of course, the amount of work you've done is practically nil. But you forced all the work to be done on the thin muscles, the small muscles. They can't do it. Therefore, you have disorganized that feeling of nice. You remember, I talked about more in detail when we showed that our body is not capable of distinguishing the amount of work we have done, but the rate of exertion. It means the rate or the organization of your body for the effort. And you feel nice provided all the muscles are mobilized to the same degree. And of course you feel very nice when only the big muscles of the pelvis are exerted, and for them most of the work of moving the body is transformed immediately into movement. Therefore that feels easy and nice. Now effort is every time you have to do something which breaks those few conditions which feel very nice. And that is when the exertion is not transformed into movement, when the rate of contraction of the body is such that the weaker muscles in the body, it means the extremities, are pushed to work harder, means to contract to a higher degree than the big musculature around the pelvis. Those are the things which feel effort. If it's not that the movement never feels like is pleasant, not only doesn't feel an effort. That's why swimming feels so nice. But swimming may be terribly tiresome and very hard work, a terrific effort for somebody who can't swim. That means he exerts, you'll find that he contracts the hands, the feet, and that, and the middle of the body, not at all. Or in general, that kind of scheme where the contraction is uniform is disrupted, therefore even weightless body, whereas it is in water, becomes a terribly hard thing to do. So you see that the sensation of effort in our body has practically nothing to do with the amount of work produced. In that on condition that the musculature should be in the normal state. If you do even a slight, gentle, agreeable movement and repeat it for a long time, or increase the rate until some of the muscles are fatigued and cannot contract at that rate, then of course again we'll set on the effort, but then the uniformity of contraction is disrupted by whatever reason it may be, whether it is by the amount of work you've done, the rate of work you've done, or the disorganization of yourself in doing the work. All these things will feel effort, but all of them will have that disruption of the uniform contraction and the generality of the use of that the contraction is transformed into movement.
Do you understand that a person whose, let's say, body is habitually inefficient, that is, in mobilizing an intention and an action, is inefficient and always requires effort, that a person who inefficiently functions is at the same time a person who, in trying to mobilize any intention, any kind of act, is always going to be blocked.
Yes, then you will never be able to organize that generality of contraction. You'll find that it's disrupted. He makes the effort with the members which he has present in his mind, and the others are neglected. Therefore, there is always contradictory exertion. That means instead of the whole body cooperating to the same end, you find some of it contradicted. It means he enacts also the thing that hinders his work, that hinders the transformation of his effort into movement. It means he produces static effort, which is absorbed in the body, in the teguments, in the joints, and there's no external work. That's why I believe isometric training is fundamentally wrong. Isometric training means contracting the muscle doing nothing. I make this, and that actually, in the ideal state, that's a madman. I mean, a man who works a whole day fatigues, and is terribly tired, but he hasn't done a thing except the whole thing all his exertion was transformed in internal resistance. Means it's the least efficient work possible. Efficiency zero. And that is equivalent of making a car work against its brakes full power. What happens? He gets hot, he will sweat, he will perspire, and so will the car. And both will be ruined if they really push it to the end. That's why I believe isometric training is one of the fundamentally trying to imitate a diseased state of the mind. And for instance, if somebody clenching his jaw so that the teeth are destroyed, well, the dentist comes and tells you, look, the tension in your jaw is so large that you must put a rubber gum like that between the teeth in order not to destroy your teeth. Well, that's the man doing isometric work day and night. Ruins his teeth, makes a lot of does nothing. Now the same teeth, if used to chew nuts, is hard, does a lot of hard work, but this is transformed into work, grinding something. That's a healthy and useful exertion. And nobody would you put a rubber thing in your teeth in order not to grind nuts. You see, that sounds crazy. And but the isometric use of the jaw doing nothing but making a terrific pressure on the teeth of one another is the most useless thing you can do. Now imagine you do the same thing. Suppose you contract all your pelvic wall and your stomach, and like in extreme constipation, you sit there bursting, nothing happens. You work hard. You can go being covered with a cold sweat. And a terrific exertion of all the musculature, nothing happens. So that is isometric work of the stomach muscles and of all the intestines. Therefore, isometric work pushed to the extreme is completely catatonic, idiotic. And therefore, trained like that, I believe a person who would indulge in that by choice is a peculiar sort of mentality. Now, that doesn't mean that if you are on a submarine, where if you don't do anything at all, and you're underwater, say, for many weeks without getting out, and where oxygen is hard to come by and you have to spare it, then obviously you don't want to produce, and there is no room for waltzing. Then it may be a useful thing to do some isometric work instead of doing nothing at all. But anybody who would sit in a swimming pool and make isometric work in the pool must be a bit cuckoo.
Moshe, would you say something about aerobics, running and other exercise done so fast, so many miles in so many minutes, in order to produce what they call a training effect and get your lungs better and like that?
Well, this is what can I do? I can't say that you can only do that sort of thing also usefully, and you can do that to ruin the person. If the person is so determined that he will get there, whatever the cost to him, Well, you will get there, but you will pay so dearly that I wouldn't do it.
Do you see any use for that in any kind of training program? And what, if so, what use do you
Yes, certainly. Provided you do it, you see, if you do, I believe that you can get to run faster or jump higher by, by reducing by reducing the friction and reducing the loss of effort, loss of exertion into joints and ligaments, but work until the movement is entirely, the exertion is entirely transformed into movement. When you do that, you will feel nice, and running that way, you'll feel glorious. But if you run like that until until your heart collapses, then obviously you will have a collapsed heart. But if it's a young body and he reduces, eliminates all parasitic movement and gets all the effort he produces, all the exertion he produces into movement, will run faster and faster. And of course his vital capacity, I mean the amount of lung capacity and the acceleration and the circulation and the blood and everything will go on improving. But up to a limit. If as soon as this comes into the state where the work is inefficient, then all he does, he trains his will effort. But as far as the vital capacity, as far as his heart goes, he overstrains them and they get only worse. And even if you run to within the limit of your ability and you keep on doing that indefinitely, means every day running 40 kilometers, I'm pretty sure that a person like that will not reach 100 years. First of all, he will probably have half his muscles torn before that. And many other diseases. You can't go on misusing yourself. Therefore, you must, there is everything like that can be a benediction and a disaster. I believe that will effort should be trained on higher human functions and not on the fact whether how much pain you can stand or how much fatigue you can stand. These are, to my mind, neurotic phenomena.